Unbroken, healing through storytelling.
Today, my guest is Tiffany Levine. Tiffany is British, but lives in Australia. She says she is a proud mummy to angel twins and 2 young boys, and she works as a bereavement outreach worker. Her infertility journey began 10 years ago, after several rounds of IVF, finally falling pregnant with their miracle twins, enduring hospital bed rest and prematurely given birth, emotionally struggling with the loss of hopes and dreams, being shattered and having a life-threatening infection. She said it felt like she had experienced the impossible. Her and her husband, Pete, both had to learn to navigate their lives again, overcoming what now and what next. 8 years later and 2 successful pregnancies, she has found healing through peers supporting others as a volunteer for a local charity and facilitating their support groups. This has been extended to her dream job as a bereavement outreach worker, supporting families with the loss of their baby through a charity program offered here, offering practical and compassionate support. So welcome to the show, Tiff. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Madeline. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome. I should say that we're kind of related because you are my sister-in-law's sister-in-law. So it's lovely to see you all the way over in Australia, beaming to me in Glasgow. So as you know, the very first question I always ask everyone is, what does that word unbroken mean to you?
It's incredible how it can mean something different to different people. For me, I think if I can get through this, then I can get through anything. And that's probably it in terms of surviving something and being able to tell the tale and help others.
Yeah. And I didn't know until I read your bio that you had IVF to become pregnant with Sky and Angel. When did you discover that things weren't going right?
So it was about 10 years ago, and that's just before we moved across to Australia. And we realised that, so in my 30s, realising that we wanted to have children. And it'd been a couple of years, and so we thought we really need to consider other support. And when we moved to Australia, which was 8 years ago, we felt it was the right time to start going down that avenue. Yeah.
And how are the services over in Australia for women with infertility issues?
Personally speaking, I've been really well supported, and as far as I know, I think it's like anything, it depends whereabouts you are, but my personal experience has been really positive. So it was just trying to figure out within that what we do, and to not get too caught up in the nitty-gritty of it becoming, overtaking our life really back then. Yeah.
It's quite an ordeal, isn't it, to go through IVF? One of my very first guests who gave birth to 2 boys born profoundly deaf, our episode was called Listen, and she said she just turned into this hormone factory, rushing from one appointment to the next, injections and rounds of IVF, and she said it was tough going.
It was, and I think, on reflection, looking back, I don't think I fully realized how much of an effect it would have. And you are having to inject yourself with hormones and really relinquish that control that we're all so used to having. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you're put into this world where you're, every single time you notice that you're having a period, and the ups and downs within that, and the hopes, and every single time trying to figure out, could this be the one? Could this be the one? And with that, we underwent 2 separate rounds of IVF, but within that several transfers. And so there was a lot of ups and downs, and it took probably 8 months in total. And just wondering, is this ever going to happen? And I've gone on to listen to several stories where people have years of it, and the money that's involved, that's another huge one. And sort of, how do you make this happen, and how much do you want it to happen, and what if it doesn't happen, then what? And just not trying to get too caught up in it, I guess.
So a lot of questions flying around during the process. And then you did manage to get pregnant with your twin girls. How, you said you gave birth prematurely. How premature were they born?
So we managed to get the 3 eggs from this particular round of IVF. And at the time, I remember specifically the gynecologist saying, should we put 2 in? And because we'd already done several cycles, we thought, well, let's just do it. What have we got to lose? And they didn't even deem to be particularly high grade eggs. So we thought, let's give it a go. And so I'm just sort of taking it back a little bit further, that even within that, we found out that there was only, we thought, 1 egg had taken. So at 7 weeks gestation, thinking that it was just the 1 egg, we went in for thinking that's all it was. And the night before the scan, I had a major bleed. And so I went into that scan thinking, well, that's it. I've lost this baby. Like, I can't believe it. You know, lucky that we've got this scan coming up. To then find out that there was 2 heartbeats in there. And to this day, I don't think I can ever fully, that elation now belongs to my twins. When we heard that there was those 2 little heartbeats, it was like we'd won the lottery. It was insane. And through that, I vividly remember coming out at the time and it being the complete wrong time to call the UK, because obviously being in Australia, and we phoned both of our sets of parents and told them. And it was the best thing ever. Like the joy that we had of finally getting to this point, and we had 2. It was beyond, particularly because we thought we'd lost. And so I take you back to that moment because it's so vivid to me just how over the moon we were. Like, I just wish, really was just so happy. And so from that, we were pretty successful till around 16.5 weeks, and everything was going really smoothly. And then suddenly I started getting quite severe cramping, and what I didn't realize at the time, that it was like a premature labor. My body was laboring, and I didn't really understand what that was because I'd never experienced it before. And at the time, my husband was away for work, and so I phoned a friend and I said, I just don't think things are right. Would phone the obstetrician to come into emergency. I left all the lights on in the apartment, just thought, I'll just go in for a check, everything will be okay. They then said, sorry, you can't go home, you now have to stay in hospital because we don't know what this is going to look like and you really need to be observed. And that was me then on bed rest. And at the time, my husband came rushing back from where he was on a flight and then had to visit me daily in bed for 3 weeks. Which at the time, I just remember thinking, no matter what, I've still got hope. And I'm now a baby incubator. This is now what I need to do. This is my purpose. This is what I have to do.
Such an emotional roller coaster though, isn't it? All these highs and lows constantly. And
I think even with any normal IVF journey, you have that anyway. There's that level of relinquishing to the situation. So yeah, it was literally daily. We were checked by obstetricians, and it was my cervix that unfortunately, they call it an incompetent cervix, and wasn't in the end able to hold the pregnancy.
Okay.
So grow big babies with 2 placentas, and as you probably know, not necessarily the biggest of people. And unfortunately, my understanding is that, and they believe it was incompetent cervix. So, so then I went in for my morphology scan to check the growth of the babies. And so for a good hour and a half, they're up on the screen and they're checking all the different sizes and all the different elements. And she said, after about an hour and a half, after seeing them and checking and everything being okay, I'm just going to check your cervix. She checked and she said, she said, I'm just going to have to go and speak to somebody. And I remember thinking, okay, so what does that mean? Still holding on to hope because everything's going to be okay. And then she came in, the lady at the time said, I'm really sorry, you're going to go into labor in the next 24 hours. And I just remember thinking, how is this even possible? And again, unfortunately, husband was traveling at the time, and I just phoned him and I said, you need to get back here. This isn't looking good. They took me back up to
16 weeks, the babies wouldn't have been viable, would they?
So so this was just shy of 20 weeks by this point,
sorry.
because we'd been on the bed rest. So yeah, so as timely as it was, so I was back into my room in the hospital. I'm phoning my husband, and literally as I'm telling him, my waters broke then. And I said, you just need to get here. I'm really sorry. You just need to get here as quickly as you can. Because it was really just us two. We had friends here, but it was just us sort of figuring out life together over here. So eventually, you know, thankfully there was enough time. Their little hearts were beating the whole time. Throughout, I was closely monitored and incredibly well supported at the hospital. Husband came in, and from memory, I think it was probably, I remember going to sleep that night, so it was probably about 12 hours later, I reckon it probably started to kick in. And I just remember being really frightened at the time, going, well, I've never given birth before. What does that look like? And what am I going to see? Because they're alive, but they're really small. And I'm really scared of what that looks like. And yeah, eventually, what I didn't realize at the time is I got septicemia, so a blood infection. And
quite a serious blood infection, septicemia.
Yeah, I didn't realize the severity of it. And so with that, I naturally gave birth to Sky, and Angel stayed inside and her little heart was beating, but it came to the point that I say we had to decide, but essentially my husband had to decide, and they said, it has to happen. We have to bring on the the delivery, because we're actually not sure what's going to happen to Tiffany. And it was all didn't really know what was going on at the time myself. But yeah, like it was just one of those things. And I guess maybe with a lot of drugs, not really fully understanding the extent of what was going on. Yeah, so.
She was delivered by a section then?
No, so it did end up delivering. It was done by induction through a drip, and she did manage to live for a very short time. I actually don't know the exact, but you know, we're talking not very long at all, but in a good way she was, because she was able to receive birth and death certificates, which was huge for us. And yeah, but at the time I was petrified to meet them, and had incredible support around us to do that, and to spend that quality time with them. And it's the best decision we ever made, and I'm grateful that we were guided in that way.
And her sister, yeah, how long did her sister live for?
Was she, so yeah, Sky wasn't able, so her heart was beating till the end, but she wasn't deemed as living on the outside necessarily. So, but we put their names together on the birth and death certificate. So,
and had they warned you that perhaps these babies wouldn't survive when you're giving birth halfway through your pregnancy, or did they say there was a chance it could survive?
I think that's the thing why I held on to hope so much. I was constantly just waiting for the next day to get further along. And, you know, at the time, I remember people so beautifully actively trying to give and support that hope, that they would say, oh, you know, there's been this person who I know that's continued on since 21 weeks, and you know, it might be okay, and just desperately, you know, naively, desperately trying to hold and innocently to that. But in hindsight, probably not necessarily realizing. But as the mum, you, as the parent, you just want to protect them to the, you know, and whatever that looks like. Of course, once I met them, I didn't want to let them go. So, yeah.
So how do you both begin to heal from, you know, going to hospital to giving birth and coming home with no babies? How do you possibly start to heal after that?
It's a good question. I think the healing continues with baby loss. I think it's, and I can only talk for myself and what I'm learning more and more about grief as I go along. I think like I'm continuously healing, and just as I think I'm doing okay, it can hit you and come out of nowhere. I think the waves are far less now, but when they hit it, you could almost be back there. And that first year was absolutely crazy. One of the nurses at the time looking after me suggested very kindly or I don't know if she was doing it now on purpose, but she said to get a little dog at the time. And, you know, it wasn't anything for us to realize that that meant that that was a purpose to get up every day and, you know, take the doggy outside and feed and have something to love and show your love to. And it did, it gave me some purpose and it gave me something to focus on. And so that was probably the beginning of how do I make this work? And I think the people around us not offering us the answers, just being with.
Yes.
Because you have to work through quite a lot of fixers around you and people that want to fix you. And I think it's cliche, but it is only time that does that.
Yeah, I think you just grow used to it, really, don't you? Whether that's time or whether that's just adjusting to the massive change, or all those hopes and dreams that were never met. It's just adapting to all of that.
I don't think I ever fully have. I think I've used it in a positive way to continually grow from that. And I've come across this terminology, the post-traumatic growth, and I've really honed in on that recently and gone, oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really is a thing. And wow, I'm really connecting with that and sort of understanding what that looks like, I guess.
And I know you're very used to listening to other people speak, and you are a little bit nervous about sharing your story. But one thing you've always done, which I've always thought was beautiful, every anniversary you share like a ceremony or something that you do to commemorate the girls, you know, letting go of balloons or writing their name in the sand and the beach. And it is, watching it on the other side of the planet on Facebook, it's very touching to see how you just remember them.
Thank you, Madeline. Like, it's funny hearing it from someone else's side, literally the other side of the world. Yeah. I think the one thing that parents, we all grieve differently, but one fundamental thing is that acknowledgement of our babies, and they did live and they were here, and that acknowledgement and whatever that looks like. And am I doing it too much for people? But I also want to do that because I'm still parenting them, but just in a very different way. No,
it never looked like it was too much. Believe me, as a mum, it is very moving. As you can see, I cry very easily. But it's just so beautiful to see that there are 4 children in your family. You know, it's not just your 2 boys. They are very much a presence. They're very much around you, aren't they?
They really are. And it took me a while to notice that and to notice them, and with the right people around me to nurture that and to realize that is the way forward, and that way that they do have their own identity in our family, and being very conscious that, you know, all of them do have that, and the kids talk about them, and it's very normal for my friends to send me pictures of a double rainbow and say, oh, I noticed it's your girls, see? And for us to create that it's never ending that way.
Mhm. So we know that you went on to have 2 more children, 2 boys this time. Were they IVF as well, or did you conceive them naturally? How did that happen?
So we had the 3rd egg, and so it's a little frozen embryo that was frozen, and I often relate my eldest's personality to that, because he is a little fighter, and I just think of the pressure that only put on his little egg at the time, because when do we transfer? When are we ready? Realizing very quickly you're never going to be ready.
Yeah.
And strangely, I met a lady that had lost on the same day as me, and she'd also lost twin boys. And it was about 6 months later, she said, I'm pregnant. And I thought, oh my gosh, wow. Oh, maybe we could. And just thinking, I'm never going to be ready. We're never going to be ready. We just have to try.
So
And
if you
just
hadn't
thinking,
met her, when would you have done it? Or would you just be saying, I'm not ready, I'm not ready?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the universe speaks volumes to me when I need to hear it. And
Yes.
it was just a very significant aha moment for us, and we just thought we just have to give this a go, and what have we got to lose? Because I mean, obviously, you know, it'll either work or it won't, and we're never going to be ready for this, so we just have to try. And so my eldest thankfully did work, and I think it offers hope to go back in the vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly the next question is, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do pregnancy
But
then?
just from a physical point of view, you know, did they have to do anything different? Did they have to stitch up your cervix, or did you have to go on total bed
Yes,
rest, or
that's
what did you
this.
do? How did they prepare your body to hold on to this one?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked, because I forgot to mention that. So we fortunately were able to have, I was able to have a cervical stitch. And so it meant in my head that I was doing something differently, and we were doing something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to 13 weeks, and they put a cervical stitch in. And yeah, thankfully, I think that mentally prepared me to at least have a sense of something's in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to do bed rest for the whole time.
So no
And
bed rest with Lewis at all. It was absolutely fine.
no, but I was okay to sit on the couch a little bit, you know, more often than before, because before that I was up jumping around and thinking that everything was okay, and just listening a little bit and just being very alert and very aware,
Yeah.
which obviously comes with some level of stress, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to
And
say there must have been so many nerves underlying, you know, is this one going to work? Is this one, am I going to start bleeding? Am I going to lose this baby? Or, yeah, it must have been such a mixed emotion. So happy to be pregnant, but the fear of, oh, we could be going through all this again.
yes, and your awareness just is so much further along. I did some volunteering for one of the charities here at the time, because it really helped me to feel closer or part of something. But with that, the level of understanding of how often people can lose, and what I experienced, well, it could be, you know, 25 weeks, it could be 30 weeks, and so on. So but within that, I do remember thinking, constantly challenging myself to not get carried away, and with the continuity of care of the people around us, if something did come up, then I could question that at the time, and you know, try and calm all those thoughts and questions that we have. So I
But
did my best to keep it as chilled as
yeah,
possible.
it wouldn't be easy. But it was okay though, this pregnancy. It was
It
nothing
was.
premature, no bleeding like the first time.
No, everything from memory And I do remember thinking, like I said, we can get through anything, you know, we can do this. And just pregnancy hormones maybe had part to play, but I just remember being very positive about it and really trying to be very strong. And whenever I wasn't, there was someone to speak to or someone to calm me down and figure that out. And I guess you've got a purpose as a mum then, because you don't have empty arms. You've got something inside you and you've got something to work towards, as opposed to just this sort of not really knowing what to sort of focus on. So it makes a big difference.
I'm just trying to imagine that moment when he's born, has gone to full term, and you're both holding this baby in your arms. It just must have been mind-blowing.
I do remember with him struggling with the during labour, going, my version is dead babies. Like, I can't compute having a baby that's going to come out alive. Like, that to me was the impossible. And I think it was about 15 hours of labour, and my obstetrician came in at the time and she said, do you want to meet your baby in the next half an hour? And I said yes. So immediately she did a caesarean, and you know, I was exhausted by that point. I'd had you know, as strong as I thought I was, the mental anguish, enough was enough now. And it was,
but it must
was
have been very triggering to be back in that place where the last time you were doing this, the result was not a good result. It must be so triggering.
I was fortunate with the support. We did a ghost tour of the birth suite before going in another time for the birth, which I think massively made a significant difference to us, that at least it wasn't the last time we came, and just to see if there was anything or what came up for us. And I think that made a humongous difference, so that when we did go in, it was a different experience. And I felt very supported at the time. I also had ended up working at the hospital by this point, because of feeling very connected to it, with having done bedrest there and having that ability to, you know, pop in if I ever needed to, and with the people that were working there at the time. It wasn't completely alien to me, so I did actually feel quite comfortable in that space, which, you know, I was very fortunate to have at the time.
But this one was very different, thankfully. You were able to give birth to an alive baby.
And that's it. And I just remember holding him, and we had this amazing anaesthetist at the time who took these amazing photos throughout. And I just look back at the photos and just realize, yeah, the extent, I guess, of how far we'd come, and finally there's an actual baby, a take-home baby. We get to take him home.
Take-home baby.
Yeah, so it was a lot for us to get our heads around, it not being two, just being one. I remember that. And I guess every time I changed his nappy, I was reminded that it wasn't girls. But yeah, just vividly separating perhaps, and understanding his identity compared to theirs. And it's not a replacement, but it is something. Your arms aren't empty and you can love something. And yeah.
And you went on to have another one, so I'm guessing there's no eggs left. So what happened with the fourth one?
No eggs left, and we were on my son's first birthday by this point, and I sat in the car as a passenger, and I said, oh, I don't feel right, I feel really strange. And my husband looked at me, and we sort of had this, because we've never experienced just becoming pregnant. It's not what we do. And the icing on the cake, the little miracle, and believing that there was a forgiveness almost. I don't know from what or from whom, but just you do get the chance to have an actual miracle, one that you don't have to work really hard for or make those decisions when's right or
So you're saying it's almost like Mother Nature thought they deserve to have a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
was that the first thing that occurred to you when you said, I don't feel so great? Did you think I must be pregnant, or?
I vividly just remember not knowing what to think, but knowing that I needed to do a pregnancy test. Like, I don't think I allowed myself to believe it, but I knew that that's the next step that I had to do, if that makes sense.
It's
It was
incredible,
definitely an
isn't it?
underlying.
Quite amazing.
It is. And when I think back to, so we were so well supported with his pregnancy, it was a very different experience because I had a live baby now, so I could do it again and do normal. I was allowed to do normal. And we even, were able to figure out, could you have a vaginal delivery after caesarean, which we managed to do. No drugs, no nothing. It was what, we're told is possible, and I did the impossible. And it was, up there is the most healing part of the journey, I'd say.
Absolutely.
And a lot of laughter and a lot of this is actually happening moments. It was up there as one of the best.
Oh, it's beautiful. And now you support other families, don't you? Tell us about your work working with people that have also experienced baby loss.
So after losing, I quickly realized that I know how much I needed support, and because I had such good support, there was a lot of people that didn't have that out there. I did some peer support work and just supporting parents just as a volunteer. And then I started working for a local charity here who provide memory boxes for families when they leave the hospital. And then went on to do some facilitating for them. So they do a monthly support group. And so we have families come along and discuss a few things, but also make up memory boxes. And so I'd had some experience within it, and I really felt it was something I, just by listening, and I'm not having to fill in the gaps, I don't have to prove that I understand where they're coming from, was really beneficial. And just giving people the opportunity to talk. And thankfully, I came across the opportunity. The charity over here was government funded to do a pilot for 18 months to offer families 3 months worth of support, 10 sessions, to go to their house. And it was called Hospital to Home, or it is called Hospital to Home, and to support them to navigate what next and what do we do now. And particularly in that acute stage, nobody has the answers for you, but it at least gives them somewhere to start and figure out what that looks like.
And do you
so
know
this
what?
job.
Yes, sorry. Do you know what the statistics are on baby loss? I mean, how common is it for women?
6 babies a day here in Australia, 2 stillborn, and then neonatal death. And obviously, so from a pilot perspective, we support people 20 weeks onwards. There's some flexibility there. It's mainly when there's been, they've given birth and delivered their baby, for us to support them. And I guess it's different to some grief, I guess, different version, because it's quite sudden. You're given this information quite quickly, and then right there and then all those hopes and dreams are broken. And they literally, as I did, have no idea where to start and what's okay, what's not, what is this normal, what do I do with this, how do I navigate this? So we come in, we support them on a practical level. We can support with the funeral arrangements and to help support that and figure out what does that look like. Memory making, emotional support, filling out forms. Yeah, the list goes on. Understanding for siblings and the other children in the families and their friends and family, and what the expectations are, I guess. And if anything, slowing the pace down a little and really just giving them that time that they need.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you just before we finish up, just if you have any advice for anyone who has experienced baby loss. What really helped you? Or what would you tell people?
I think the openness to receiving support, and if something's offered to you, then give it a go. And even if it feels like it's the impossible, that, if I think back to when I was going through what I went through, I'm so glad that I did go along to a support group, because I wouldn't have met the people that are friends with me today. So that openness to receiving, I guess, was one of the big ones. And I think knowing that it's impossible to imagine, but one day you will experience joy again. And if you can do the worst, and that's got a layer, then you can also have joy, and that's also got an added layer to it.
I think that is just perfect place to end, that it's really impossible to imagine that one day you will feel joy again, but you are the living example that absolutely joy and gratitude can come back to your life. So Tiffany, it just leaves me to say huge thank you for staying up late in Australia and coming onto the show. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making this possible. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Unbroken, healing through storytelling.